and let us all do we can to build a better future.
All right. Well, we are going to talk about, there's a bunch of stuff to talk about today, but first of all, as many of you know, I have been following for a long time uh, SNAP benefits in this country, also known as food stamps. This is a federal benefit that is administered by the states that allows people to purchase food. And one of the things that I've focused on a lot over the years is the fact that the way this program is managed often makes it very difficult or can make it very difficult for
Mhm.
people to be able to get the food that they need, in part in some cases because they don't live near a supermarket or a supermarket that has good prices, um, or simply because they're running from pillar to post, working multiple jobs, and it's hard for them to go out shopping. Well, one of the things that's been happening, and I'm happy to see it, is that finally the Department of Agriculture is allowing people to use their benefits online. With online retailers and online delivery services. And there have been some expansions at this point which are looking very hopeful for a lot of people. Instacart and Shipped, in particular, are going to be expanding their acceptance of government benefits for grocery purchases and other types of purchases. Uh, very quickly. They're updating their systems to allow for this to happen. People will be able to use not only in some cases their SNAP benefits, in some cases possibly getting into WIC benefits, Women's, Infants, and Children, which is a much more restrictive program, and also being able to use temporary aid for needing family benefits to pay for non-food items as well as delivery fees. So the platforms are expanding, they're updating their systems to allow this, which I think is going to make some progress toward achieving some kind of parity in this country when it comes to purchasing food and making it a lot easier for people who are already struggling to either be able to pick up their groceries by after ordering online or actually having them delivered.
So, here's the thing. I know that President Biden, it says so in the article too, where he's planning on ending hunger worldwide. Eleni, recently I was, you know, taking care of some errands and doing some projects, outside, for the studio and for Hard Lens. But, I've been seeing more and more people, I'm seeing more programs or people asking for help or for need, and it's for hunger. And I'm seeing all these billboards also all across the city talking about Americans starving in this country or
Mhm.
going days without food. And in the richest country in the world, we can't provide a much needed resource for the American people. And that is, at using the old propaganda of 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And for many Americans now, that's like, what? Speak English. Three breakfast, lunch, and dinner in one day. What are you talking about? It's madness.
Well, I think that, I mean, and we can talk more about because I've got a lot more on this show about this issue. But I think that one thing to be understand is that inflation and supply chain issues have really impacted food banks and food pantries.
Hmm.
And they're usually sometimes they'll take food donations, but in many cases they're actually buying the food outright. And the cost of a lot of basic things like peanut butter, for example, has really gone up. And also to understand that SNAP benefits don't necessarily go up along with inflation. And people don't seem to realize that food stamps are not renewable resources. If you get $200 in benefits a month, you get $200 in benefits a month, no matter how much the cost of food has gone up in your community or in the stores in your community. And so there's no real adjustment there. And so that's actually quite critical to understanding what's going on with food insecurity. There's just multiple things happening right now. And so I am really pleased to see that Instacart and Shipped are stepping up, but there's a lot more that could be done. And I'll be getting into that in the next segment. But I did want to point out this article in Reuters, which talks about what these online delivery companies are doing at this point.
I'm just taking this from the chat. Food is now becoming a luxury, not a right in America.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. There's actually a lot of things right now that are becoming luxuries in America, including, for example, access to public spaces like parks, which I've been talking about on this show for a while. We've now got tent cities here in Chicago in our parks, public parks, and to the point where one local public park recently had to close down its field house. So people of that community no longer have access to what's supposed to be a critical resource for people in our community because now it's where people are living in tents.
Yep, and in my neck of the woods, especially here in the south side of Chicago, I'm seeing people in their own fair share of tent cities, and it's just getting worse and worse. And seeing homes being shut down, apartments being closed off. It's not good, folks. And food insecurity is a very real thing in the richest country in the world.
And I would like to see us take a better approach to this, but the Biden-Harris administration has decided that it has a solution. Supermarket News recently reported on this. By the way, Supermarket News, if you are interested in retail, groceries, food policy, this is a great industry publication. It is not done with a political or an activist slant. It's for people who are in that industry. And I always recommend that our viewers check out industry publications because there's going to be a lot of truths there that you're not necessarily going to pick up in generalist publications or activist publications. But
Wow.
what is going on right now is that the Biden-Harris administration has an $8 billion plan. Okay. And it's the 5-pronged national strategy on hunger, nutrition, and health. So here's what's getting me here. At least $2.5 billion will be invested in startup companies developing solutions to hunger and food insecurity. Right here in the United States, where we do have aging and crumbling infrastructure, we actually have it. And over $4 billion will be earmarked toward philanthropy that widens access to nutritious food, promotes healthy food selections, and raises Americans' physical activity. So we've got $6.5 billion that's actually not going into the pockets of the poor.
I also want to say, when it comes down to philanthropy, like I talked about this on a Jimmy Dore show, philanthropy is just another way for the rich to launder their money. Money laundering. I mean, that's what happens when I think of the word philanthropy. It's just a way to money launder, and only and those rare cases where you see a poor person receive the benefits of it, they've been pre-selected and they've been told, hey, you read this script. If you don't read this script in this way, in this format, you're out of here.
Philanthropy, look, I mean, I'm not going to. Philanthropy is right. It can be money laundering, but it is also a mechanism of control. A lot of this is saying, well, we're going to promote healthy food selections and raise physical activity. I think that most people know that a package of Oreos is not health food. I think that most people fully understand that, physical activity is incredibly important. But guess what's really helpful with physical activity? Having parks and field houses. But we can't manage to figure out how to house the people who are now living in tent cities in these areas. What I'm not seeing here is I'm seeing a whole lot of money being transferred to startups who are going to do what? Say, to tell people, a startup is going to do what? Try and figure out a way to get people to eat healthy food, even though healthy food can and should be available in grocery stores, in communities, but people may not have the money to get in there, to shop. They may not have the public transit here in Chicago. Roughly only 65% of the scheduled, Blue Line trains ran yesterday. And they don't necessarily, they can't use their SNAP benefits in some cases because they may not have, or they have limited access to using those SNAP benefits, because SNAP benefits in many cases prohibit you from buying hot foods, even though the hot food may make a lot more sense for somebody who, say, for example, their utilities have been shut off. There's no flexibility here, and they're not actually talking about putting these billions of dollars into the pockets of the poor. They're talking about making jobs that engage in further gatekeeping, that enrich investors, that help some people launder their money, as you pointed out, and to employ I guess we would call it the professional management class, who get to gatekeep and decide and wag their fingers at people. Hey, do you know that Oreo cookies are not health food? This is one of the things they're proposing right now. They want to put nutritional labels on the front of packages. Now, in the US, they have to have a nutritional label on it, and it's usually on the side or on the back. It's not that difficult to know how to turn things. At this point, they're just playing with us.
I also want to point out that in the article it says, and again, we're all in the same boat here. What's more important, the report said that the hunger and diet-related disease isn't distributed equally, disproportionately impacting communities of color, people living in rural areas and/or in territories, peoples with disabilities, older adults, LGBTQIA plus people, military families, and veterans. So, in other words, what this article is also pointing out is that in America, everyone is struggling with food insecurity. That's what's happening here.
And their idea is to put billions of dollars in the pockets of entrepreneurs, investors, and the people who run charities.
Yep.
And not actually put it into the communities or into the pockets of the people who can then decide what is best to feed themselves and their families. They're not doing a damn thing to keep public parks and recreational facilities open to the communities, because they don't want to bother with doing the very difficult work in helping people who are entrenched in homelessness and in that cycle get into permanent housing. This is where we're at, Kit.
Richest country in the world, folks. We're number one, not only in the prison industrial complex. Now we're number one in the most developed country with the most with the most food insecure populace in the world. We did it,
in
folks.
The most tent cities.
Yes, we did it.
Public parks, it's maddening. And for folks who are new, by the way, you can actually look underneath the video. There's a link to the show notes. That's actually my little newsletter. You can subscribe, so in case a certain platform decides to not send out the notification, you'll get that in the afternoon to remind you to tune into the show. But you can actually read these articles for yourself, do your own research. I absolutely encourage that. In fact, we all encourage that here at Hardlands Media, don't we, Kit?
Yep. Also, by the way, folks, I mean, again, before we end this segment here, but we have money for war and more money for war, but we can't feed the people. Do you understand? So stop asking questions, folks.
We have money for programs. We have money for startups. We don't have the money to put into people's pockets. What might be really useful in getting supermarkets into so-called food deserts is that the people there have money in their pockets and they have jobs, so that they can spend their money at these supermarkets, so that they have meaningful work.
Yep.
All of these things could be addressed, but we continue to give money to the people who are profiting from misery and poverty. Agreed. And disenfranchisement. Yeah, this is what we have now. So this is what we're looking at, folks. I'm very much behind the technology that will allow for online shopping using government benefits. I absolutely support that. I think it's going to be a win-win for everybody. But a lot of this is a bunch of nonsense.
Agreed.
But it makes people feel good about themselves. particularly those in the Biden-Harris administration.